So, what's this class about anyway? As you know from the blurb in the syllabus, the thematic material in this class is probability, which is a branch of mathematics, and that could conceivably scare some people away if they think they're not very good in math. But in the syllabus, it specifically says, don't be afraid to sign up just because your math background is shaky. All calculations will be done with calculators, and nothing is more complex than simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You might be wondering how this is possible, and whether it would be typical for a math class to impose these sorts of restrictions on itself. Well, this little video will go into some background to answer those questions. In order to explain what's going on, I need to do my favorite thing, and that's to connect ideas. In this situation, we'll connect math with some history. Most math classes are just math, but I myself believe that we can gain a much better understanding if we always remember that all math came about because a particular person in a particular place at a particular time was trying to solve a particular problem. We won't actually be going back to ancient Egypt today, but we will be setting our time machine to go back to the dark ages of the Cold War. Dun dun dun. Right. The so-called Cold War started about 1947, a couple years after the end of World War II. It was a time of worldwide tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. The USSR had been allies with us against Nazi Germany, but that warm relationship fell apart quickly after the war. In 1949, the United States formed the NATO alliance with many of the countries in Western Europe. This map, by the way, is more recent. It includes countries that weren't originally part of NATO. And things continued to get worse. Beginning in 1953, the U.S. sent U-2 to the USSR. Wait a second, that's the wrong U-2. There we go. As I was saying, the Lockheed U-2 spy plane made regular flights over the Soviet Union, reassuring CIA image analysts that our own nuclear capabilities were superior to those of our enemy. Then, on October 4th, 1957, disaster struck. The Soviet Union successfully launched the very first artificial satellite, which they called Sputnik. The president at the time, number 34, was Dwight David Eisenhower, who had been a very successful general during World War II. And pretty much off topic, whenever I mention Eisenhower, I always feel compelled to mention that when I was born, it's recorded in my baby book that I looked like him. Not such a big deal, actually. I think all babies look like Eisenhower. Anyway, at the time, in 1957, Eisenhower put on a brave face and said that Sputnik didn't worry him militarily, and he was probably right. The satellite itself, just under 2 feet across, didn't actually do anything but transmit a radio signal, and its batteries died after 3 weeks, so it posed absolutely no threat to any of us, even when it re-entered the atmosphere 5 days later and burned up. But the fact that the Soviet Union was able to launch such a satellite suggested that they might also be able to launch nuclear missiles and reach the U.S., and this was a scary prospect. One of Eisenhower's main goals as president was always to stop the spread of communism throughout the world. He entered Korea, remember, and a year after the launch of Sputnik in 1958, he started singing a worried tune. He had come to realize, he said, that the USSR's science and technology was better than what we had in the US. And if things continued, it could sway the balance of power. Well, obviously, we needed more scientists if we were to keep up with the USSR. The response, of course, was for Congress to throw money at the problem. In 1958, they passed the National Defense Education Act, which very soon exceeded $1 billion in expenditures. Adjusted for inflation, that would be about $9 billion today. What resulted was a change of curriculum, that is, new ways of teaching, not only for the sciences of physics, biology, and chemistry, but also for mathematics. These new curricula were very well intended, but like all educational reforms, they stumbled a little bit and had many parents and some students reacting negatively. This new math, which actually was called New Math, wanted students to go beyond memorizing rote facts and instead actually to understand math, how it worked and why. By the way, if this sounds a little familiar, it's because this idea has carried over to the present day, and systems like Common Core also emphasize understanding over just memorizing number facts. So, what's in the new math? Well, lots of things that weren't in the math curriculum before, but a couple topics that really stand out are an emphasis on set theory and some amount of coverage of what's called modular arithmetic, including switching between different bases. Now, I would be the very last person to say that any of these topics is unimportant or even uninteresting. I've even taught all of these in college classes. But there's a lot of room for discussion as to whether any of these should be taught to high school kids or 6th graders or 2nd graders, all of which have happened. Set theory, in particular, has moved to the foreground, much to the dismay of certain students and certain parents for that matter. Set theory is incredibly powerful, but it's not necessary for every single problem that we want to solve. So, that's where some of what happens in a math class comes from, and I hope you see that there are good reasons, well, at least historical reasons, as to why we do what we do nowadays in school. It's not necessarily wrong to teach math this way. It works for many students, but an educator needs knowledge and finesse if they want to broach certain math topics earlier rather than later. And as for our thematic material, in this class, let's peek at what probability looks like if we want to build it up from a solid foundation of set theory. Take a deep breath. Wow, just wow. Let's hold this slide for a bit, just to admire its beauty. Honestly, this is fabulous stuff. It's actually the way I was trained in some of my own favorite math classes. And starting this way would let us do so much more with probability than we will ever accomplish in this class. But get real. If we started from here, I would most likely lose most of my students. And the truth is, we can get pretty far with just our basics: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, all using a calculator and not having to reduce fractions. So, hold on to your seats. We will be able to learn a lot of probability this term without any fear of exploding our brains. I hope you enjoyed this little venture into connecting with ideas. Now, try to decide, was this a lecture on math, or history, or political science, or education, or what? That's the question we started with. What's this class about, anyway?